you know, if we did just go totally back to what we really did back in the 20s and 30s, because I guess the feed yard industry really started back in the 40s and 50s. And so if we went back to that and we wanted to still produce the same amount of beef that we had today, what would that mean from a beef cattle industry?
Well, there's been a lot of technologies, safe technologies that have been developed that allow us to accelerate the growth of the animal naturally. You know, we do it through genetics, we do it through somewhat on hormone implants, or one way we can do it. Those are all been proven very safe and effective ways to speed that process up. To get the same amount of beef produced, we'd need another 64 to 65 million head of cattle to produce the same amount of beef. And if to do that, then we had to think about what kind of environmental impact would that have. And so if we add 64 million to a population of 90 million that we currently have, and what would that do to the environment? And is that sustainable? And in most cases it would not be, because we've gone to intensification through our grain finishing approach. Not saying we couldn't produce a lot of grass finished cattle, but we could not produce the same tonnage we do right now and sustain our environmental conditions. And so there's some give and take that would have to be done if we went to that model. And you know, if that's what everybody chose to do, we could do it. But it would really change the environmental impact that beef cattle production would have in the United States.
So really, because of the way that we do things, we use less water, less methane production, less land use resources that we have today.
Absolutely, and the resource use, and a lot of the grass finish programs don't use a lot of the recycling that we do in feedlots. We don't have the ability to mix it into a grass ration. You know, if they're grazing, you don't feed it. So we lose the ability to take some of these byproduct feeds off other industries and run them through and make this high quality protein source. And so I think that's something we really have not accounted for a lot. What would we do with that? That would have to go to landfills or find some alternative use for it. Right now we can produce extremely high quality food with it. Once again, you have to make that decision if that's the route you want to go, or if you want to have more animals or produce less product and consume less high quality protein. But in reality, we need beef cattle, as we've stated numerous times, to manage our natural resources. And so we need to find that balance within the country and how many we can run to sustain our forage production systems and produce enough high quality protein.
So you might compare a little bit between the U.S. production system, which does do some grain feeding, and mixing in, of course, as you said, 80% being grasses that they would consume over their lifetime, versus maybe Brazil. You know, what's that? You said 18 months for us to get a steer to being finished. What is it in some of these other countries?
Most of them will be 24 to 30 months. A lot of those cattle will come in and they still won't be real fat, but they'll have enough age on them, they'll have some frame and some muscle. So they don't really take them to a finish.
That's another 6 months to 12 years that you're feeding.
Yes,
that you're owning that animal. That's animals consuming air, water, and
you know, and that's one of the complaints we hear about. And not picking on Brazil, but the Brazilian model is clearing additional land to run more cattle so you can finish them on grass. And that's something we'd have to make that decision. Is that acceptable or not? And in their model right now, doesn't appear to be socially acceptable to do that.
And you know, the World Wildlife Federation, I saw in a report that they put together, that they encourage the use of these production technologies because they see that if they don't, they will do things like that are happening in Brazil.
With the world population increasing like it is, the demand for protein is going to go up. As the economic status goes up, protein consumption goes up. So people like World Wildlife, now I applaud them for looking ahead to see that if we don't intensify production, we're going to have to take in more land mass, which takes out wildlife habitat. And so there is a real reason to try to intensify as much as we can on our most productive land and not clear marginal land and put new land in, in fact, you're going to be competing with other species.